day.
I know. I know. They had chapel in front of the old building. There's a picture of that somewhere around.
The next day they held chapel in front of the building?
Jack says we'll have, he wasn't even in town the night of the fire.
Right. That's what Levi said. He was.
I called him up at Okoboji and said, Old Main's on fire, and when I know anything, I'll call you back. And then there he was. He didn't know what to expect.
Well, we're going to get started. So
Okay.
Just look at me.
All right.
Just answer questions. Just you and I talking. We'll take out the good parts and
Okay.
use those in the video, so you can't
Good.
make any mistakes or say anything wrong. And you already started talking about my first question. Tell me what you remember from that night and how you first found out and what you were doing.
Well, I came home from PTA meeting that night, and I wasn't in the house very long, and the phone rang, and it was a boy from the dorm telling me that Old Main was on fire. So I went out to look, and then I went back and woke up our son because he was sound asleep, and he'd have been sick if he hadn't gotten to see the fire. But Bob Knapp was the businessman at that time, and he came over too, and we called Jack and we said, we'll call you back later. And then later Bob and I called him and told him what shape it was in, and I think he got back down here about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they decided to move everything. Fortunately, we had the boys' dorm. If we hadn't had the boys' dorm, I think we'd lost everything, because the boys all came up and helped carry things out. And if they'd been scattered around town, they couldn't have gotten there in time to do any good. And Jack had a brand new desk in his office that they had taken in, and they'd taken the top and screwed it on, then they put a glass top on. And that night they just carried the whole thing out at one time. There was just a little bit of paint along that was all. But, and I had $60,000 worth of bonds in my living room for a while in a wastebasket.
The endowment for the college was
Yes.
in your wastebasket.
Yeah.
Did you go down then to the fire?
Of course, it was right across the street.
Describe the scene for me, would you?
Well, people said, oh, well, it was started by electricity, and it couldn't have been. The lights were all on during the fire. Otherwise, they couldn't have carried things out. They couldn't have seen it. But Jack thinks, of course, I don't know if it's true or not, but they had just finished putting the roof on. And he thinks maybe one of the workmen had dropped a cigarette down in, and there were some rags or something that smoldered in the attic. And that started, because it couldn't have been electrical with the lights on.
That would have shorted you out.
Yeah. And you could stand there and hear all the pianos drop down and hear this ding and think, oh, those beautiful pianos. Yeah.
What did it feel like watching? I mean, was there a sense of helplessness watching it
Yeah.
go up?
Mm-hmm. And I remember that they threw books out the window from, I've forgotten her name now, who was teaching, they were all children's books. And the next day I saw a woman pick them up and start walking away, and I said, you can't take those. Well, somebody down the street took some. I said, yes, I know, but I can't catch her, and I can catch you. So I made her put them back. They thought as long as there was fire, they could take anything they wanted. But it still cost to replace them.
Do you know what some of the other things that got saved were? And
Oh, they got all the records out. And I know it took maybe 1 or 2 kids to haul them out of the building, and then take 3 or 4 to haul them down to Victory Hall. But it's amazing how your adrenaline goes when under stress like that.
how long did it take to, once the people were there and arriving, the fire was underway, how long did it actually take for the things to burn up so that, I mean, you couldn't get in there and save anything? How much time was there to?
Well, I really can't say, because I was in the building, and of course the kids were in carrying out records and everything, the file cabinets that they could find. So it took a while, because I think it started at the top and went down, so you could have a little more time.
What was the importance of Old Main, the people, you know, I've been here for 10 years, but I've come long after
Yeah.
it was ever there, so it's hard, I think, for some of us to understand what Old Main really meant to the campus and what losing it meant.
Well, it was the college because there weren't many other buildings. Of course, there was Swope Hall and Science Hall, and the old Smith Hall now, and then the gymnasium. And then we had Fracker Library, which was back of the where they built the boys' dorm, and all. But well, it held everything. It had the what do you want to call it? The snack bar was in the basement, and everything was in that building.
So it really was the college. And
Yeah,
when
it
it
was.
went up, at least for a
It
few
sure did.
moments,
I know Jack, somebody told Jack one time, oh, it was a blessing. And Jack says, yeah, it may have been a blessing, but it was sure disguised for a long time. Because he had to raise the money to replace it.
Well, tell me about Jack's reaction. I mean, a lot of people have talked about sort of his leadership in that first 24 hours. Really made the big difference.
Yeah.
What was his, when he first came back and you saw him and he got back into town, what was his reaction? How was he behaving?
Well, he was so busy thinking of what they could do because they had to make arrangements for classes. They had classes over at Lakeside Presbyterian Church, and they moved a lot of the offices and all in the boys' dorm. And our office, Jack's office, was in our house, and his secretary was in the entrance hall, and he took over the dining room, and then he had meetings in the living room. So it was a little hard for me to keep house during that time.
The thought of giving up, packing it all, never entered his mind.
No, he was too busy thinking of what should be done.
And classes started at 8 o'clock the next day, right? Did you find that remarkable? That
Well, I just didn't think about it, really.
just was one of those things that everybody pitched in and helped?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing how people did pitch in and do things. The townspeople were very helpful.
What were some of the struggles in the aftermath and raising the money? And a lot of the people we talked to, I think that in their minds they think, well, Jack said we're having classes tomorrow, so that's it. We're going on. We're continuing on.
Yeah.
And the rest just sort of took care of itself. It had to have been hard.
It was.
And can you tell me a little bit about I don't know. It must have been for years afterwards a struggle to get things, or at least for a while.
Yeah. Well, they of course had immediately planned on how they were going to replace the building, and they shaped it so that the chapel could be in the middle of it. And of course that was built long before the chapel was built, because that was more necessary than the chapel at that time. And the two things that came out of the fire was the Christian flag and Dr. Sampson's plaque on his, I forgot what, it was some club he had. And those are the two things. I said, Jack said, well, there's Christianity and education right there.
And we still have that flag. I mean, that
Yeah,
flag is
they do.
still used.
For a long time, they couldn't find it. They found it in the closet in one of the janitor's offices, and they've used it ever since.
Now, there was another story that I think that folks have talked about. The stones from the Victory Arch were actually discarded inside. I guess some of them thrown in the lake, and then
No.
They were gotten out? They were saved right from the very
They were saved directly, and they were all numbered so they go
Right.
back in the same way. Yeah, and then of course that was put up in the corner of 3rd and College at that time, where you could look through it and see. Well, it's the big picture over there on the wall, and all. And then of course they had to move it later on, but. Oh no, there was never thrown. No, what happened was, and they may have been confused on that. nobody wanted the bricks from Old Main. You know, you wanted used bricks. Well, in those days, they wanted new bricks. And Jack couldn't give them away. So he got permission from the state, and they moved back some of the dirt and all around the lake, and it had a Christian burial. So there are a lot of those bricks under the ground around the lake. Uh-huh.
So Old Main's still there.
Yeah.
Still a foundation.
Sure is.
What are your thoughts of having been associated with the university and college
Mm-hmm.
for so long, to see where things have come from that very devastating moment?
Well, it has really come a long ways.
Would you have 40 years ago thought it possible that
Well, I really didn't even think about it at the time, but it really has come a long ways.
a lot of people have talked, I think, about, in fact, I think one person said they thought it might have been President Fisher's finest moment.
Well, that's what they've said in the book, yeah.
Do you think that that's
It could have been, yeah.
he was certainly someone that everyone talks about as
Mm-hmm.
being passionately dedicated
Yeah.
to the college at the time.
Of course, when we came up here for an interview, nobody in their right mind would have come up here as a college president. Because we went into Old Main, there were all these broken down student mailboxes and all, and Jack said that's the first thing has to go. It was a horrible entrance to college. But when we left here, we said, well, I don't know, if we are asked to come, it's kind of like a minister says he has a calling. We couldn't any more have said no than sick 'em. And we enjoyed every minute of it.
What do you think about the, I guess you talked about this a little bit before, that maybe the realization, everybody thought of Old Main as being the college, it was the building, but the reality is that the college was always, and still is always, a community. It's always the people. Do you think that became evident?
Yeah.
In
Because I know that fall, the first fall we were here, the Kiwanis Club that Jack belonged to came out and helped paint the seats of the old stadium. And they did things like that for college because nobody had any money. But nobody worried about it because we were all in the same boat.
And that still continued after the burning of Old Main, even more so.
Yeah.
How important do you think that Old Main was perceived to be for the community? I mean, how much did the community get involved in helping to rebuild? And
They did an awful lot. Yeah, they contributed an awful lot. And of course the Shalers contributed the money for the chapel, most of the money. And of course the Presbyterian Church USA gave money to the building too. So it was just a lot of people contributing to the building.
anything else that you can remember from the time from that night, the weeks, the months, even the years that followed?
Oh, I don't know. There are probably a lot if I could think of them. But
Tell me just a little bit more about the buildings that there were or weren't on campus. Aside from Old Main, what else?
we had Swope Hall and Smith Hall, and which was a chemistry building at that time. And then we had Victory Hall, but it was called Edson Hall at that time. And then we had Fracker Library. And then I think at that time too, we also had the housing for married students over in the, well, I suppose it'd be along where Peterson Drive is now, I'm not sure, along in that area.
And that was pretty much it.
But a beautiful view of the lake.
Describe Old Main to us a little bit more, but before it burned down. What did it look like? What was it like being in the building?
Oh, it was a nice building. And of course it had all the classes in there except chemistry. and they had the pianos there, and oh, I can't remember. And of course, the offices, the registrar's office and the treasurer's office. But I can't think too much more of what was in there. I've got pictures of it.
Yeah, we've got
Yeah.
a bunch of those.
Did you ever find the picture of Old Main with all the kids there for the chapel service the next day? It's around somewhere.
Are they? I think that I've got. I think
Yeah.
I've seen that.
I know that I got a bunch of pictures from Bundrock Saley afterwards because they said that they would have no reason to keep them. So I have one on the wall of the fire that night, and I've got a couple more. And but I don't know. It was quite a night.
Tell me about the chapel service. Was chapels normally on Thursdays?
Every day.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
So tell
In
me
those
about,
days, you had it every day.
Tell me about the chapel service. And
Well, they just stood around, and Jack conducted a chapel service, and the kids were all enthused and all raring to go.
and people showed up for chapel.
The students did. It was required. You had to go to chapel.
Right, every day.
Yeah. I did when I was in college, and I didn't mind it a bit.
Anything else that you can remember or think about?
Oh, I remember that Les Williams lost most of his books because his office was in the basement, and all the water fell down on all of his books. Some of them they were able to dry out, but most of them they had to burn and get rid of. Mm-hmm.
I think that, I don't know, it seems now that the kinds of things that BB University wants to aspire to, when you consider where it's had to come from, particularly again in the wake of, doesn't seem so impossible. If you take a
No.
look at what's happened over the last 40 years.
I know.
That's,
The people were there at the right time. Now, Henry Olson was the man for the time that he was there, and he held it together. And all the other people have come through, and they've all been necessary for their time.
what do you think that Jack Fisher will be remembered most for?
Oh, probably his black cigars. He smoked. No, I think it'll be the burning of Old Main.
And,
Yeah.
coming back. Good. Anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I can't think of anything on the night. I know of a lot of things afterwards, but
What are some of the?
well, we used to have, of course, in those days they didn't have the facilities like they do now to get your food fixed, but at the end of each season, the football and basketball and baseball and track, we used to have the senior athletes for dinner, and the coaches and their wives, and I fixed all the food. Sometimes we had as many as 60 people. But, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I could never do it now, but it was fun at the time. I was young then. But, and we did, in fact, I still have a vase up there that the baseball kids sent me afterwards with long stem roses in it. And I've enjoyed, and occasionally I see some former students too. Mm-hmm.
Other things in the years? And the time?
Well, I remember that that we were going to put anything that was done in our house, we did it. Because somebody said, oh, every time they raise money for the college, it goes into the president's house. And Jack and I said, no way are they going to say that about us. And he and I pulled the paper off of one of the rooms, and then he had to go to Synod meeting in Ames, and so Bob, our son, and I did it. And I don't know how many coats of paint we got off of that wall. And one of them, the pattern along the top was like, oh, at least 24 inches from the ceiling. So it had been there a long, long time. But, and then when we put linoleum in the kitchen, we had a picnic, and then everybody pulled up linoleum, and because it was cheaper that way if we did it ourselves.
Sort of like the old-fashioned barn raising.
Yeah.
Well, great. I don't think I have any more questions unless you
Well,
have
I
any
can't think of any more.
else you'd like to
I
add.
probably could think of them after you leave.
That's always the case.
Yeah.
That's always happens.
Uh-huh.
So, as far as like rebuilding and that kind of thing, were you involved with that type of work?
No,
at all?
but every night after they were through working during the day, Jack and I'd go over and walk the new building around to be sure they were putting things where they were supposed to. So I was involved in it, but that was as far.
Did you get involved in any of the fundraising, or was that mostly?
No.
did you-
Mm-mm. No, my husband said, I'll run the college, you run the house.
That was the deal.
And that's where it ended. He said he would tell me anything that was going on at the college as long as he didn't go somewhere and hear me quoted. So I never told anybody anything because I figured I wanted to know what was going on. And I would go to meetings and they'd say, this is so, and it wasn't true. But what could I do? I had to sit there and bite my tongue. Because I learned early in my married life to keep my mouth shut.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Any other questions you'd like to ask? Or? Okay. You gonna
Did you
survive
get
it?
a drink out at the fountain?